Vic Lahiri here for the Good People Podcast, Episode 3. And today I'm extremely excited to bring the one and only Shawna Armstrong. She's an independent consultant that helps build hiring systems for construction companies and other types of industries. So very excited to have this conversation. Shawna, thank you for joining and really excited to have you on the show.
Hi, thank you.
So Shawna, we talked a little bit offline about different things and trajectory, careers, things like that. Would you mind giving the audience a little bit of a recap of how you've become such a key player in the recruiting and talent acquisition space for the construction industry?
Yeah, sure. Sort of by accident, but for a reason, I guess. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody, I don't think anybody, any kids say they want to grow up and be a recruiter. I sort of fell into it, and I spent about 20 years in a very large corporation that was doing recruitment and hiring for other very large corporations. And so over that time, working across industries, across roles, across levels, and then on different functions within the recruiting space in the company, I developed an expertise on recruitment and hiring and leading teams to
Nice.
do that. So after about 22 years with the same company, I wound up losing my job in 2019, and was sort of, it sucked, right? It hurt, it stung, it was a sting to my pride, but I also was pretty miserable in that large corporate setting, working for large corporate companies for a lot of reasons that we could get into, but I was miserable. So after I sort of indulged my little pity party for a few minutes or a few weeks, and I was like, okay, well, I've got an opportunity for a fresh start here, and this is scary, but it's also exciting. I could go back to what I know in that like recruitment, outsourcing, corporate world that I know very well. I know how to do that. I could go and add value immediately to a company, but I hate it.
Mm,
The other option was to, look for something where I can be just internal to a single company and,
right.
and have more control into the frustrating parts of the process that I had to deal with when working with other companies, or start my own business, which,
Yeah.
at that point was intriguing, but very scary, having been in a full-time corporate safety net for my entire career.
Yeah.
So and then I had come across a job description for talent acquisition with BuildWit, which was a very small startup serving the construction industry.
Nice.
And it really just intrigued me the way they talked about kind of their mission to help the industry and the affinity that I already had for the industry because my husband is a blue collar guy. And so that really pulled me, and I went and spent a few years, working in a scrappy little startup, and it was awesome. And I got to build a hiring process from scratch. And then after 3 years of there, built their hiring process, helped them scale their team to the size that they were going to scale to, built a recruiting business for the industry, which we ultimately decided not to go forward with because it's too competitive of a sport for a
Hmm.
company that wants to support all companies within the entire industry. And
Right.
so my ability to add value based on what I do best sort of came to an end, and I was at that crossroads again of, do I want to go to, I knew at that point there's no more going back to corporate recruitment outsourcing, and getting to kind of be an entrepreneur inside of a startup company and doing that successfully then gave me more confidence to consider going out on my own. And so ultimately, I figured that is the way that I can help more companies as opposed to being an employee of one company. I
Right.
can help more companies. And I think even though this road has been so much more difficult, I knew it was going to be difficult. It's so much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. but I think that I was really drawn to it because of the opportunity to grow and learn in painful ways, but in impactful ways, I guess.
No, that's great. So one thing that you touched on a little bit, and you mentioned in 2019, you know, you were laid off. Obviously, everybody in their careers go through things like that. For you, having the perspective of now 4 years from that time, if you had the opportunity to talk to yourself then, the day you got that cliche pink slip, which I don't, know if it's pink slips anymore. But what would you tell yourself? Like you mentioned pity party for a few weeks, but if you had that perspective and you can talk to that Shawna from that time, what would be like the two or three things that you would tell yourself?
Well, knowing now that it was for the better, I would say trust that it's for the better.
Yeah.
But I did after I kind of got over the sting to my pride. I realized that I also had a huge sense of relief because
Mm,
I wasn't happy, but I was comfortably uncomfortable, I guess.
interesting.
I knew what I knew, and I knew how to do my job really well. So there's a comfort level in that,
Right.
and I knew how the business operated. I knew how to navigate in that world, and I knew the people inside the company who I could trust, who I couldn't. And so there's a comfort level in just all of that, and just knowing what you know and being confident in what you know, even if it's not bringing fulfillment, right?
Sure.
And then I guess I convinced myself to a degree that, oh, it's just the same bullshit everywhere you go, that the grass isn't necessarily greener, and it's going to take a while to find that out.
Right.
So we're new, we're here. I already know what I know. So
And that
yeah,
part of your career you mentioned was recruitment process outsourcing, which people term as RPO. Is that right?
yeah. Hmm.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about what, because I think one of the things that people, in various industries, especially construction, automatically assume is recruiting is just one thing, which is headhunters or whatever it might be, right? Would you mind sharing a little bit about just what that recruiting process outsourcing RPO model really is for companies?
Yeah, sure. I think like a typical recruiter or recruiting agency,
Mhm.
they'll bring people to a
Right.
company. Recruitment process outsourcing is we take over the entire hiring process of the company that hires us, and it's typically very large companies with high volume recurring hiring, and we just kind of would become part of their team, and we would run their process inside of their already established process, inside of their ATS that they were already using. And what was frustrating about that is a lot of time the processes were broken, but our job still as a recruiting agency was to bring people into the process and
Got
didn't
it.
necessarily have any say over what the process looked like. So it's great, you can bring people into a process, but if it's a broken process,
Right.
you know you're just kind of churning through talent in a market at that point.
Right.
And so there was a lot of attention to speed and volume,
Mm,
and less attention to quality. So it was more of kind of like not having control over the quality, and hustling and hustling, but not necessarily doing the things that would be the right things to do, because that's not within your control.
right. Got it.
Um,
So in
whereas
that capacity, that's where the role that the RPO is sort of they are they provide the people that can work within the system no matter how good or bad of a system it is, but they're providing the personnel to do the sourcing, the screening, the full kind of process, if you will. Got it.
yeah,
Is that right?
yeah.
Okay.
So it's sort of an outside team that's an extension of your team, but working within your existing process and systems.
Yeah. Gotcha. No, that's interesting. And is that kind of did you have so where you are today in terms of, independent consulting, building the hiring systems, throughout your experience with RPO and then obviously eventually with BuildWit, is that when did was there ever a moment you can imagine where in the back of your mind you're like, gosh, there's such a better way to do this. If I were in charge of the world, this is how I would set up. Is that something that came through experience, or do you recognize that point where you're just like, man, this has got to be a better way, and I kind of know it.
Yeah, because yes, I got to work with lots of different companies
Yeah.
in lots of different hiring processes with lots of different applicant tracking systems and ways of doing things. And there were, I got to gain a little bit of mastery in hiring software,
Hmm.
and to, an ability to see and understand what works well and why, and then a lot of frustration and head banging over the things that didn't work well, that I didn't have, the ability or the authority to do anything about.
Got it.
So when I went over to BuildWit, I was the only person at the company that knew anything about recruitment and hiring and talent acquisition. And so I was basically given free reign to go and build a system from the ground up, exactly the way I would envision it. So taking all of the things that I know work really well, not doing any of the things that I know are, don't work well, and taking out all of the pieces of the process that cause frustration for candidates, for recruiters, for hiring managers. And so I did get to do that. I just completely build it from scratch, and it was great, and I loved it, and now I just want to do that like again and again and again. And that's my offer essentially.
Nice. And so take us through that. So for example, when a business owner in construction, oil fields, whatever it might be, right? Hard hard industry, they come to you, and is there do you find yourself where they've already struck out with hiring and they're realizing there's a problem here, or do certain people come to you proactively? And when they do come to you, take us through kind of like what's your typical process to understand and get them started on this journey of building out a system.
Yeah. So since I've been out on my own, I've had one client, and I have a proposal out right now that I'm waiting on. And that person came to me through my LinkedIn DM, somebody that was already kind of a customer follower of BuildWit, and so had just kind of reached out to see if I could help him. He was a company owner, but he's also the CEO, and he's also the CFO, and he's also the trainer, and sometimes he's an estimator, and sometimes he's an equipment operator, and he does all of his own hiring as well. And so he was struggling in that regard. And in our first conversation, he had mentioned that he was trying to hire a project manager for 3 years, and he made 3 bad hires and still, had that position open. So, when I had asked him how much money did he think that those 3 bad hires cost his company over those 3 years, he said, easily hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that, if I could come in and build a system for him that would be able to give him confidence in his hiring decisions, for one, but then also bring more people in the front end and have a process that he didn't have to do manually, that was systematized and automated and built completely out to where all you have to do after that is flip the switch on and off when you have, a position, open or close, and then, the system pushes people through, does the automated communications, does some of the screening, has automated interview scheduling and things like that. So
Right.
that was a game changer for him. And I mean, I think eventually he's going to bring in like an office manager or somebody to kind of manage it ongoing, but it's minimal because I built the system for him, but then I also preloaded it with interview guides and job descriptions
Nice.
and email templates and set up all the automation. So it really is just, there's some daily, monthly maintenance on it, but it is essentially just flipping switches on and off as you have jobs
Sure.
open and close.
No, that's great. And I think what most commonly, I'm sure when clients come to you first, they're used to using the typical platforms like Indeed and things like that, right? Like a job posting platform. What's your opinion on that in the sense, like, do you think that platforms like Indeed really, what would you say the biggest misconception is, guys, about Indeed? Because that's one of the things that I think people assume just by posting a job on Indeed, it's basically problem solved. You can have great people just contacting you being like, I'd love to work for you type scenario. But in your perspective, like, what's your opinion on that in terms of platforms like that, and do they really work?
I think that Indeed is the most high candidate producing job board because it's the most common, broad based one. But who are you marketing to on Indeed? Only job seekers. Only people who are actively looking for that specific job in that specific location at that specific time. So that's all that you're reaching. And you'll reach them all, pretty much if they're there, but you don't have in this industry a ton of people looking for work. Most of the people are employed unless they're just entering the industry or they're working for a company that they're not happy with and are looking for a change. And then there's a whole other set of population that are, where I was when I was happily, unhappily, comfortably, uncomfortably employed, where, yes, my interest will be piqued by a better opportunity. So whether it comes to my inbox from a recruiter or whether it's a really good social media post that shows a company that looks really interesting, like it's doing some cool stuff, like it really like recognizes and celebrates and takes care of their people, well then, I might want to go take a look at that.
Hmm.
So, you know, that's not what Indeed does. Indeed, is where you put your job description for a very specific job that you have open right now that's going to be visible just for people that are actively looking for work. So yes,
Right.
it's probably the best job board, but should it be your only, recruitment marketing avenue? Absolutely not.
That's a great insight on, I mean, I actually didn't even, so, and I remember a graphic you recently posted about that circle, right, and the pie chart, and it's like, what percentage of the people are you really reaching? And I think that what you just said is so compelling just because of the fact that everyone assumes, one of the biggest frustrations we hear from Indeed is just, or not from Indeed, or clients that use Indeed is, you know, they miss sort of, they don't understand the amount of time it's going to take to, once they post a job, that's really step one of probably 8 to 10, right? Then it's like reviewing the resumes, then scheduling the interviews and all these other things. And that's where, like you were mentioning, it's kind of like they wear so many different hats. So once they post a job, they think they can just come back and the perfect candidates are just going to wait in the inbox and they can just click a button. But in reality, it's just the job seekers is who they're reaching. So you touched on something very interesting. So it's essentially kind of like marketing in a way, right, of the magic that's in an organization, and then kind of proactively getting the message out there and sharing that with people that maybe aren't necessarily on the market, but it piques their interest, right? What have you seen that has worked for companies in helping identify what that might be? Because I think most business owners might think, and I think there's a certain aspect to culture in that too, right? Social media by some personnel in the trades, things like that, is looked upon as, oh, people are showing off. Most of it's all false, etc. So it may not come very natural to a business owner in the construction space or in a field staff space, etc., to say what can we really shine the light on to bring the people in. How do you normally help you know have those conversations with clients to really help identify what are some of those, areas that people will be attracted to.
Yeah, so first of all, everything that a a a company leader, a company page, or a company
Hmm.
employee posts on social media is recruitment marketing, whether it's intended to be or not, and whether it works well or not. Because what it's doing is providing a glimpse inside your company.
Right.
Either what you do, who you serve, what your message is, what kind of stuff you're working on, how your leaders lead, what their philosophies are about problems that they encounter, or the way they view challenges, or the way they think about the people inside of their organization. So if you think of somebody whose interest is going to be piqued by any of that, or even somebody who sees a job on Indeed and isn't familiar with that company, what are they
Right.
going to do? Right? They're going to go, on the website, on the socials, check them out. Who they are, what are they posting? If there's a career page, great, that really like talks about life inside the company and career paths and how people are supported, that's great. In the absence of that, it's like, what can you find on socials? What are they
Hmm.
talking about? How do they talk about stuff? What might it be like to work inside this company? That's what people want to know. They don't want to know what are all of the tasks that a superintendent performs on the job, because a superintendent already knows what a superintendent does
Right.
on the job. So, it's answering the questions about like what what is what is the mission? How does this role contribute to the mission? What are the outcomes that need to be created by
Right.
this person? Who is the person that's going to thrive in our culture, in our environment? What is the day to day look like? What are the challenges that need to be solved short term and long term? What are the typical frustrations of this job that your company helps alleviate? Right? That'll pique the interest of somebody who's, working as a superintendent somewhere else and has, a frustration, that whatever frustrates them on a daily basis, that, your company has newer technology or equipment to make that part of it easier, right? Like, what's the pay? What's the schedule like? How much am I going to have to travel? Do you, how do you take care of people from a safety perspective and a mental health perspective, right? Because we
Right.
know this industry is a dangerous industry, and this industry is very hard to work in. And so, yeah, it requires a certain degree of grit and character to be
Hmm.
able to thrive, but that also comes at a physical and mental cost. So how do you care for people, and how do you keep people safe on the job?
Right. Which is, it's so interesting to me because one of the, obviously as you can tell, I'm a follower of yours on LinkedIn, which everyone else should be as well. Is the recent post you did was describing, I think it was like two different job descriptions. One was like a mission-driven, outcome-focused, proactive job description versus like bullet point list of tasks and all these other things. And you've done such a great job of like I've never seen it like created in that simple way of like which one would you rather apply to, right? And it was just such so is that kind of generally when you're kind of advising people in companies and things like that, and the first thing, let's say they're using, most common thing they're doing is just posting job descriptions initially to just get people in the door or to apply. For you, what are some of those things? So you mentioned outcomes and sort of the mission and outcomes. Is that kind of formulating if you were to create a formula for the quote unquote perfect job description, right? What would that formula for you look like that you'd recommend to the industry?
Yeah, so it's a pretty comprehensive formula, and I did create it and outline it, and I put it up. I put it up for sale on the internet.
Oh, nice.
It's a downloadable guide how to create job descriptions that attract, right? So that it's not, you're not writing one that is a long list of things that somebody already knows is what they're going to do and be responsible for, and a list that is so long that it includes everything that they might see or do or touch or have a hand in or have a say in. And so
Yeah.
now it sounds like three jobs rolled into one. It sounds like a nightmare. And then that's followed by, a list of demands of all the things you must do and have to do and must be and have be. And, that doesn't pull somebody in, right?
Yeah.
So I did write a guide for how to use wording that is more candidate centric,
Right.
and instead of company centric, like we're the best, we're growing, we're great, we won all these awards, you
Yeah.
know, great. Like your customers might want to know that, but you know, your candidates they want to know what's in it for them, right? So language that is geared towards them and what's in it for them, and more supportive than demanding. So instead of you must have this, you must have that, more of you will be supported in this way. You will receive this type of training and development. We supply these tools for you to work more efficiently and be
Right.
more successful. We have these specific perks that support your well-being, inside and outside of work. And then there's a whole other set of how to make it more concrete, how to make it more interesting. I put examples in there that are construction specific, and different ways to talk about things and word things, so that it's more compelling, and also that it will resonate with the person who's the right fit for the job. They'll feel like, oh, like that sounds like me. That's exactly, this job is perfect for me.
Nice. And one thing we'll do, Shauna, is we'll get that link from you, and for everyone listening and watching, we'll post that link in the comments so they can take a look at that. And because it's like for me, it's such a obvious place to start, right? No matter what the systems are, if it's not attracting and speaking to the right group, right? The rest of it just doesn't doesn't fall, doesn't make sense. So that's very compelling. So we'll definitely post a link on that in the comments and down below. So check that out. So you touched on something very interesting, right? Blue collar industry, safety, mental health. How have you, in the different conversations you've had with both, LinkedIn followers, industry, et cetera, how are you seeing that focus on mental health? Mental health. Obviously, a lot of companies say they're focused on safety, but mental health has obviously been an important conversation for a while. We're seeing a little bit more of it, in socials and things like that. How have you seen the increase of that as a topic in a conversation, especially within the construction space and other sort of demanding industries? And how have companies used that as an advantage to speak to the right fit, if you will?
So from a job marketing perspective, you know it's an elephant in the room, right? And it's also presents a pretty double-edged sword, like because it's an elephant in the room. It's an industry, right? It's not for everybody. It's really hard. It requires a very specific type of person that's going to thrive, and that toughness comes at a cost. And yet we're trying to attract new people into the workforce, the next generation, who, by the way, is much more attracted to kind of like work-life balance and quality of life, and having a mission that means something, and being cared for at work, into an industry that's dangerous and has mental health issues and concerns. And so I think overlooking it sweeping it under the rug, or not talking about it or pretending that it doesn't exist isn't going to do a company any justice. I think it's, we know that it's better to say, we know that this isn't for everyone. This is who it's for, right? And
Right.
if this describes you as a person, if this is the type of thing that you like, then it is for you. And by the way, we know it's hard, and here's how we support you in that
Right.
journey. Here are the things that we provide, whether it's any type of wellness initiatives or mental health counseling or suicide awareness training, the hard hat stickers for the suicide hotline. Just seeing it talked about more is great, and I think it's something that should be talked about, because it is, for the right type of person, it's an extremely rewarding career. But again, it's also very, very hard. Very,
Yeah.
very hard, very dangerous, and that that's part of the reason why I think it has a negative stigma, and
Hmm.
and and part of the reason why there are a lot of misperceptions about the industry. Maybe people thinking that it's even worse than it is.
Right.
So, what does it look like?
In shedding that light on these industries, especially ones, obviously most common conversations we hear about, high level labor shortage, right? Skilled trade shortage, obviously continually going to get worse based on the percentage of population that is retiring in the next X number of years, things like that. Obviously there's no doubt that there's a problem. How do you look at that problem? Like, for example, what does your instinct say about sort of, until we solve X, we're never going to solve the bigger problem, right? Of like, things like that. And do you look at that when you hear labor shortage or workforce challenges, et cetera? I feel like we all get so caught up in just talking about the ultimate outcome of how do we fix it. And what I always try to think about is like, what is the first step that we can take as an industry, as a group, whatever it might be, in terms of generating awareness or whatever, right? But there's always seems to be that moment of inflection when things do start to shift, right? Things do start to attract more personnel or et cetera. What do you think, what do you think that will be for our industry in terms of, what do you think that inflection point should be, or will need to be, to really start moving it in the right direction?
It's absolutely stuff like this, right? Like having these types of public conversations that can trickle out into society, because the schools are not talking about these types of careers, and parents are not talking about these types of careers unless they're in the field, right? Unless they're
True.
in the industry. And so outside of that, right, like people that work in the industry bringing friends and family into the industry, and outside of companies individually forming partnerships in their geographies with high schools and trade schools, it's these broad-based conversations,
Hmm.
and it's all, to me, falls under the umbrella, like this conversation is recruitment marketing, because we're talking about the industry and spreading awareness about it. So what companies typically review as recruitment marketing is posting a job on Indeed, right? So you've got like society, all of society up here, parents, schools, teachers, the media, social media, and then you've got, below that, you've got individual different industries, right? So you've got, professional careers and college careers that's being promoted. Every 12th grader is asked, where are you going to college, right? And then, you've got, like the tech and the gig economy, and like, the Uber Eats drivers and the YouTube stars, and that's got a lot of like social media attention, right? That's
Right.
like in everybody's face. And then you've got the construction industry, right? So now you got like society, you've got all of these other industries, and then within the construction industry, you've got the individual company that
Hmm.
people might not know about. And then you've got within that company a job. And that job, that's where people start and end with recruitment marketing typically, is like post this job and that and try and get people to apply, and that's recruitment marketing. But really, like, you got to zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, and have these conversations, because all the way up here, society needs to be informed by the industry, because they're not really being informed in many other ways outside of, dirty jobs, and I don't
Right.
know what else.
Yeah, no, that you're definitely right. Like, how does the industry get to mass market, just like the tech industry has, obviously social media, things like that, right? Because it's almost like, and it's all kind of connected in a way of not wanting to talk about ourselves, talk about the great job, talk about the great culture, what's really makes it special, and then that kind of evades down in industry as well. So that's interesting insight. For you then, once so recruitment marketing is one aspect of it. When you're looking at an organization, one of the things shifts that we're starting to see in organizations is the discussion of what that hiring team, once a system, as a part of the system being in place, what that hiring team, needs to look like, and subsequently the discussion of like HR versus talent acquisition, how that differs in terms of mindset and focus. Have you seen that happen in different organizations? And if so, like what is your opinion on what the difference is, or like how to look at someone that in the concept of HR versus talent acquisition in this new market?
Yeah. Well, talent acquisition is a part of HR, right? HR is kind of the whole scope of people.
Hmm.
So, it's performance management, it's onboarding, it's benefits, it's, change management, it's hiring. So talent acquisition is a piece of HR, and then I think recruiting is a piece of talent acquisition. Talent acquisition is, recruiting is bringing people in. This is my definition. I don't know if
Sure.
there's, maybe, the HR associations have formal definitions, but to me, recruiting is bringing people in. Talent acquisition, to me, is more about the systems and the processes of how you bring them in.
Hmm.
So, that has to work, because if you keep bringing more people into a broken system or process, they're not going to get out the other side. So, yeah, you want to
Right.
bring people in, right? You want a recruitment market. You want to have great job descriptions that attract people. You want to have a great employment value proposition and a company career page. But then once you hit apply and go through that hiring process, if it's difficult, if it's time consuming, if there's no communication, if you're selecting the wrong people, then it doesn't matter how many people you bring in the front end.
Right. So for you then, kind of the future, what are some predictions, I guess, and don't worry, we're not going to hold you to it, but in the next 3 to 5 years, because obviously I think if we look at even the resurgence of LinkedIn, right, as a platform in the last 2 to 4 years, especially probably post-COVID, there's been so many shifts, if you will, right? Like the carousels and the posts, and it's like a great platform, thought leadership platform, et cetera. People like you that are driving the change and talking about systems and things like that. As you look forward, what are some things that you know you see shifting, or you think is going to be a trend in terms of how companies shift the hiring process, or even attracting the blue collar workforce? Like what are some things that you think are things that we're going to in 2027 be like it's just run of the mill now, whereas 4 years ago it might not have been. Anything like that that you kind of see?
Well, I mean, I I see a shift happening because I'm seeing a lot more companies become more active on social media.
Hmm.
I'm seeing a lot more like construction media companies and freelancers.
Yeah.
But, is that just because I'm connecting more with them all and I'm paying a lot more attention to it? So, like, is it growing as much as I think it's growing? I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. I do hope to see, this industry thrive. Society depends on it.
Yeah.
And I just really admire the people that work in this industry. I don't, and I can see how hard it is, and I have just a great appreciation for how hard it is and the work that people do, and how
Right.
important the work is to society. And we've got this big infrastructure bill, so I mean it's a pretty wide, well known societal fact that we've got a problem and that this industry is the one that's going to fix our crumbling infrastructure, right? And
Yeah.
so I think I think it's happening. I see it happening. I see a lot more conversations, more podcasts, more posts, more content
Hmm.
creation. So I'm hopeful. I like to see it continue to grow, and then see the government jump on board, the media jump on board, and continue to help make the industry thrive again like it once did.
Yeah. No, that, and I think you're right. It's a lot of the social media, it's like based on who you're connected to, you see a lot of their shares and things like that. But I think there's also new prominence of, and even companies like BuildWit are kind of have done a great job in building that brand awareness from what people want to see. The equipment, the all the cool stuff that really draws the eyeballs, right? And then great examples of those things. And I think there's a lot of companies are seeing the you know, added benefit of sharing those things, equipment, skill sets. Even for our side, the videos that continually do well across the board have always been our skilled trades personnel and the videos of them on their job site showing off what they're doing, whether it's a working for a client in a multifamily environment or emergency response work, but that sort of behind the scenes look always engages so well that those are the kind of things that always draws people in, which is very exciting.
Super interesting content because guess what? Nobody knows.
Right,
No, and
right.
people, have maybe a hazy perception of what some of that work might look like, and they're like probably totally wrong.
Right.
So it's interesting. It's educational and it's entertaining.
Yeah. No, and you're, it's the perceptions are so wrong. And even on our, staffing side where, we have people apply and they're like, oh, I'm going to try a new industry. And even some of the misconceptions they have, and a lot of them are negative connotations of what the industry is like and what the people are working around. And for them, it's like entering a new industry, whether it's a project engineer or even like a general labor or whatever it might be, bringing them in, but having a little bit more of a ramp up, like an onboard, which is sometimes in blue collar, like, not necessarily, it's a kind of like, hey, sink or swim, but it's like easing them into certain things really helps sort of break some of those misconceptions they have coming in, which then builds a level of anxiety that, oh man, like waiting for this to happen, if you will. But then easing them into it helps them create a much more softer landing and then, longevity on the other end versus a high turnover and kind of a sink or swim environment, right?
It's true and it's so needed, but because there's been a prolonged talent shortage and you've got more and more people retiring, you've got, kind of the workforce has been thinning out,
Hmm.
and that has made the need for training
Yeah,
grow so much more, but also the capacity and ability to train shrink by that much more. So
right.
it's a hard, it's a tough challenge. It's going to be kind of painful to get the pendulum to swing the other way.
Right. But to your point, I mean, you are, obviously companies are at the forefront. So if people like you can help them hire more efficiently, because that's the number one frustrating thing people will say, right? Gosh, it's so hard to find good people, which is actually how we came up with the name of the podcast is we were talking when we work with construction companies and these different types of emergency response organizations, the most common thing our sales team, recruiting team hears is it's hard to find good people nowadays. You know, are there any good people out there? We just want some good people, right? And it's like, and as a result, the people are just willing to just train, but they're like, just give us someone that's willing to show up on time, work hard during the whatever 8 hours, and we'll take them from there. But it's that's the first thing, right? And so
Yeah.
the companies, if as they can figure out that system and help increase the chance of attracting the right types of personnel,
Yeah.
I think that's a very key step. So Shawna, where can people engage with you and you mentioned your content, your guides, but how can people find you and work with you?
So I am pretty much living in LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my office.
Yeah, nice.
I'm working on a website. I'm working on like building out my business and my structure and delivery systems and putting together some, digital products that could be more of a low cost DIY
Mm-hmm.
option for a company as opposed to having me come in and do a complete build of a hiring system for them.
Right.
So I'm pretty much just, networking, connecting, giving out free content, and having conversations through comments and DMs inside LinkedIn, and then some
Awesome.
of those come outside to meetings and sales calls.
Makes sense. So, we'll definitely post a link to your LinkedIn profile below, and your follow. I think you're like 8,000 now, right? Followers on LinkedIn, which is impressive. I don't know if you keep track of those metrics, but yeah, huge following. And so I always like to kind of close out with one or two kind of more general questions, lighthearted. So for you, what's a recent book that you were jazzed to read?
Oh, without a doubt, there are lots of them, but the one that I think is the most impactful for what I do and why I do it is The Attributes by Rich Divini.
Okay.
And he is a retired Navy SEAL, and he wrote a book that describes, I think it's 25 attributes that are most predictive of success for somebody who makes it through the SEAL training.
Wow. Okay.
And hint, it has nothing to do with physical strength, which is interesting. So it's all about personality and character traits.
Right.
And because the construction industry is so hard and so challenging, I believe that a lot of those traits are also traits that are predictive of success in this industry. And so I use them
Mm-hmm.
in developing, describing kind of the ideal candidate in a job description. And then
Yeah.
I also use those attributes to develop interview questions so
Nice.
that, you know, your marketing and your job descriptions and, is a way of to attract people in the front door, but then you have to select the right person, right? It's like you talked about the first step is getting good people in the door, but it's really two things. It's getting enough people in the door and then selecting, having enough to choose from and then being able to have confidence that you're selecting the best ones out of that and not, just basing it on a gut feeling or a vibe check. So,
That's great. So it's Attributes by
The
Rich Divini.
Attributes by
The
Rich
Attributes.
Divinity.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I gotta add that to the list. That's great. And what's your guilty pleasure, Shauna?
My guilty pleasure, probably it's completely outside of construction and recruiting. I really love to watch police interrogation analysis videos on YouTube.
Is that right? So that's like
I
what, a
like to have
recap of, meaning like a video interrogation and then kind of doing like what, like you like meaning watching people get interrogated or like the analysis of that?
Yeah, there's a couple channels where they have, police interrogations filmed, but
Yeah,
then there's, the analysis is done by, body language experts and behavioral analysis and
yeah,
police interrogators. So they kind of talk about like what the interrogation tactics are that are
yeah.
being used. And then
That's
they're
awesome.
talking about like what signs that person is showing distress or that they're lying. Super interesting to me. It's just like reality crime junkie
Right.
guilty pleasure.
That's amazing. I didn't even know that was a thing, and I'll definitely look that up as well. Another good way to spend some time on YouTube. So, Shawna, thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time and sharing your expertise. I really enjoy the work that you do. Really appreciate it, and looking forward to being a part of that. But thank you again for sharing your expertise, and looking forward to seeing you on the LinkedIn front and have your systems grow.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks.